It's that time of the week again, Sonnet Sunday. As with before, I would highly advise you watch the introduction to Sonnets video, linked now, which will go over the basics of how a sonnet works, because if not, I'm going to be saying a lot of stuff that you're going to be really, really, really confused about. And also I've got Sonnet 1 last week, obviously. Right, that out of the way, we'll get on with the sonnet. When 40 winters shall besiege thy brow, and dig deep trenches in thy beauty's fields, thy youth's proud livery, so gazed on now, will be a tottered weed of small worth held. Then, being asked where all thy beauty lies, where all the treasure of thy lusty days, say within thine own deep sunken eyes, wherein all eating shame and thriftless praise. How much more praise deserves thy beauty's use, if thou couldst answer, this fair child of mine shall sum my count, and make my old excuse, proving his beauty by succession thine. This were to be new made when thou art old, and see thy blood warm when thou feelst it cold. So, once again, we have this theme of procreation. You're gonna have to get used to that for the next 15 sonnets, I'm afraid. He really does hammer on about it. So, basics first. Address to the fair youth, along with the other 126 at the start, part of the so-called procreation sonnets, aka the first 17 of the 154. It's less of a threat this time though, more of a terrifying hypothetical. This time the poet tells the youth to think of the moment deep in the depths of the future when he reaches the venerable age of 40. Dun dun dun! The horror, I know. When his beauty is gone, and people ask where it is, what's he gonna do if he hasn't got a child to point at? Which, as I'm sure any parents watching will confirm, is really the only reason to actually have kids. Yeah, so I think it's probably best with this sonnet to point out some historical context. Life expectancy was obviously not what it is today back in Shakespeare's time. The average lifespan for England in 1600 was around 35 to 40, which when you factor in the terrifyingly high infant mortality rate, means that most people over 5 could expect to make it to their late 50s, early 60s, so better, but still not great. This hopefully puts into context why 40 seems like such a terrifying prospect. Equally, there would have been no skincare, hair products, and lives were a lot harsher and harder back then, so this idea of someone losing their beauty completely by 40 and looking back on it longingly isn't that ridiculous. Now structurally, this sonnet is quite fun, as sonnets go. You can map it onto the traditional Shakespearean model, that's 3 quatrains and a couplet, but it also fits that good old Petrarchian style, an octave, 8 lines, followed by a sestet, 6 lines, though clearly the rhyme scheme is still very, very Shakespearean. Essentially, the difference is that the last quatrain assists the couplet in the resolution of the stated problem, thus making a sestet, 6 lines. So the opening quatrain, or first half of the octave, suggests that when he's 40, oh no, the horror, the beauty that he cherishes so much now will be faded and long gone. Pessimistic? Quatrain 2, or the second half of the octave, then proposes that it would be a crying shame if he were asked at this horrifying age where his beauty has gone, and he could only reply, oh, it's gone in the past. But of course, quatrain 3, or the first 2/3 of the sestet, look at me, theatre student, doing maths, then suggests that wouldn't it be so much better if when someone asks that question, you could say, well, I might look terrible, but my kid looks great. Obviously, that's so much better. Finally, the couplet, or the end of the sestet, here we get the final appeal that a child is the ultimate way to live on past your death. Now, where have we heard that before? Now, at first glance, this sonnet can seem a bit, well, surface level and not that dissimilar from Sonnet 1. And while the latter is certainly true, this sonnet also poses a very interesting and arguably philosophical question. Where does one's self-worth truly lie? In the self? Or in the world's opinion of the self? The poet appeals to both within the sonnet. It asks, what if someone, i.e. society, the world, questions, where is your beauty? Which doesn't have to be read literally, of course. It could be read as the beauty of the mind, or the beauty of the heart. And obviously that will change for each person, whether this sonnet would persuade you. Of course, the fact that beauty in the rest of the poem is kind of referenced mainly as, appearance, we can probably infer what that might mean about the youth's concerns and sensibilities. We can guess a little bit. And boy, does narcissism seem to be high on the list. In terms of running metaphor, this one's quite a fun one, in my opinion. The first half of the sonnet is filled with imagery of a battlefield. The 40 winters besiege thy brow, like a siege. It digs deep trenches in thy beauty's field. Trenches, though associated most heavily with World War I, were common in many wars and battles, especially in the 1500s, which was the early days of gunpowder warfare. And his youth's proud livery is gazed upon, like the livery, or banners in normal words, that will be planted by the nobility of a battle in this period. We also have a tottered weed, which undoubtedly would have been found on a battlefield, not as obvious as the other ones, but I think it works. His lusty days are referred to as a treasure that would normally be looted from the enemy army once you've defeated it. Deep sunken eyes has also got a fun meaning. Deep sunken could be the graves you bury the dead soldiers in after the end of the battle. Might be a push. And if I'm really, really pushing it, the all-eating shame could be reference to worms. The all-eating worms that would consume the corpses of the dead after the battle. So yeah, I wonder why the youth needed another 125 sonnets after Shakespeare called his face a battlefield. Though, let's be fair, the wider metaphor of a battle against time or a war with old age that we are all inevitably destined to lose is quite apt and fitting to this sonnet, if a tad depressing. Well, on that cheery note, I think we're done, so do like if you enjoyed this little rant, for want of a better word, and don't forget to subscribe, because I'll be back next week for sonnet number 3 for some more heavy-handed metaphors about procreation and death. Yay! Alack the day when one begins to beg, when the powers above thou hast to bribe, but if thou this fine channel wish to peg, then, good fellows, I implore you, subscribe. Alas, but still thou shalt not be informed if this author a tale he has to tell. My heart would thus be eternally warmed, if like cries of yore thou ring'st the bell. Last, if thou finds an item thou dost enjoy, allow me yet another deal to strike. Thine patronage I would seek to employ, therefore, fine friend, feel free to drop a like. But now we end, and I wish thee luck, and pray thou friends, forgive this rambling